In a previous video, I went over this custom router table that I have been working on building out of a Woodsmith magazine. I have spent the last 4 years slowly building the case carcass and learning how to build the dados for the shelves, building the drawers, finding the hard maple for making the legs, and so on and so on. And in the last video, I talk a lot about how it's taken me a long time to get where I'm at, and it's been a slow process of learning a piece and doing a piece, learning a piece, doing a piece. I'm finally closing the final corner on getting this thing finished and usable, and I feel like my skills since I started have definitely leveled up. But I don't want to take that opportunity and just throw it all away. I want to power forward and use what I have. So we're going to be talking about taking this piece across the finish line with 2 final videos. The first of these 2 videos is going to be on the top for the surface that this whole thing uses, and then I'll have another video coming about the fence that sits on top of that. Starting out, I'm going to be working with a glue up of 2 3/4 inch pieces of plywood. This is to provide thickness and stability I'll need for a solid top. I have outlined here where my router lift will go, and using a drilled hole for a start, I cut out the space using a jigsaw. I then clean up the edges and use a drill drum sander bit to clean it all up before test fitting the lift. Now, the instructions for my lift recommend cutting a grooved edge in your top and setting the plate on that, but instead I'm going to be using these Kreg plate levelers, which you can buy separately. They go in each corner and have adjustable screws for creating a level surface to attach your lift plate to. Once they're installed, I do some test fitting of the plate to make sure it all fits how I would expect it. I will be covering the plywood top with a sheet of laminate. I found a local cabinet shop that would sell me a scrap piece to use, which ended up being way cheaper than buying a full-size sheet at a local store. I will first cut it to rough size before starting the application process. You can find a lot of people on YouTube giving you deep dives on how to apply laminate to worktops, but it ended up being a fairly straightforward process. There were a few challenges, though. My first one was that the temperature for your pieces and your contact cement need to stay all above 60 degrees for 72 hours prior to use and 24 hours after you set your application. Now, my workshop is mostly uninsulated, and here in the Pacific Northwest, during the wintertime, those temperature swings can be drastic from day to day, so I needed to have some place inside I could use to set this up. Additionally, on top of all this, contact cement can off-gas a lot of fumes, so I needed to have some good ventilation and then some lung protection to have on top of it. I was really starting to wish that I had done this during the summertime. So instead, I moved everything to our unfinished basement and let it adjust for temperature for a few days and then went to work. I applied a coat of cement to both the surfaces and then let it dry, and then applied another coat and let that dry. The goal here is to have a fairly tacky to the touch surface on both of your two pieces. Now, the trick with applying things with contact cement is remembering that as soon as these surfaces come into contact, they will adhere, and you best be ready for that. People have many different options for what they would recommend on how to handle this, but I think the best thing that I found to work was some strips of lath that I had used from a previous home project, and I layered these out across the surface and then laid my laminate on top of it and was able to use that as a way to separate the two while I lined it all up. Then I could pull out the strips of lath one at a time, fully seating that piece down, and then rinse and repeat until I had the whole thing down on there. It made for a fairly tense experience, knowing that I didn't have a lot of options once this was all down, and I didn't want to go through the process of rebuilding all of this, so I was really hoping that I did not mess it up, but I was able to get it to line up pretty well. I then used a paint roller to just go over it all and make sure that I didn't have any bubbles or missed spots in the application. Now, the final step here is to cut out the inside space where the lift will go. I kind of went back and forth if I wanted to cut this out before applying it or apply it all and then cut it out. And I think that trying to cut it out beforehand would have made lining it up a lot more tense experience. So I decided to apply it first and then cut the section out once it's applied. Now I just used a straight edge knife, gashed several spots in the open space, and then took a hammer and broke those sections away. You can buy special laminate cutting blades for jigsaw or other tools like that, or there are some people who recommend cutting it from the bottom and using tape to try to deter cutout. I didn't really have any of those problems. I had a pretty jaggedy mess once I had a large portion of the inside section cut out, but I took my router and went around the inside once I had it all done, and that made a super clean, and I liked how that ended up working. And then finally, I just go around the whole outside of the edge, giving it a nice round over, and now our top is done. In the next video, I will talk about cutting slots for installing the fence and then building the fence that will sit along this whole top, and then we'll install it all and be done. Thank you for watching.